Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jaroslaw Ganczarenko. I represent the language service provider Get Language Solutions from Poland. We are Warsaw based and I'm doing the technical job. I'm translation engineer, but in fact I'm also translator and conference interpreter. So I have linguistic background, and the subject of my presentation is to show you how the machine translation system actually may work in a business environment, very demanding business environment. And also demanding because we are mainly single language providers, so we translate from Polish and into Polish. So let me first give you the brief overview of what we are doing. Get Language Solutions in numbers. So we are present on the Polish market for 21 years now, and our team has 46 people, project managers, engineers, customer service specialists, and so on. And in the last year, 2015, we translated 60 million words. It means that there were 9,500 projects, and 90% of all these projects were related to the Polish language. As I said, we are a single language provider. Our main language combination is English, Polish, Polish, English, and other languages with Polish. But English, Polish is the main one. And we are serving about 770 active Polish and international clients, and have about 1,150 active vendors among freelancers and LSPs. We are certified for two norms, ISO 9001 and ISO 17100, and we renewed our certification a couple of months ago. And we, of course, are using advanced server-based CAT solutions and also translation management systems that are connected to the CAT tool. This system is to manage projects, translation projects, and we have machine translation system integrated into our CAT translation tool workflow. And then we have four main areas of expertise: law and finance, industry and infrastructure, life sciences, and IT and communications. So let me start briefly to say why we decided to adopt machine translation as a solution in a business environment. So there are four major reasons why we decided to step into this path of developing machine translation system for ourselves and for our client. We wanted to win the race against the clock because machine translation, as it was pointed out very frequently before in previous presentations, means higher productivity, which means faster turnaround. Our clients, business clients, often demand from us to deliver the translation as quickly as possible. It is very common in our business that we have to translate thousands of words from one day to another in different language combinations. Very often it is so that this translation should be even sworn translations for different purposes. So machine translation is definitely a way to help us to deliver this translation, translation faster. Of course, we wanted also to reduce translation costs because there's a common trend in the whole localization and translation industry, the pressure on the price. We are selling our translation for our clients, so the client asks us to translate more for the same money, and machine translation is beneficial both for us, for the clients, because paying the same, they have more content translated. The third reason, there are some type of contents that are never translated. For example, user-generated content, chats, emails, some messages, and so on, because it would be too costly to put this kind of text to human translation. So our clients didn't want to translate this, but having machine translation in place as the solution, they may ask to translate it at the fraction of the cost of the normal translation and get the notion what they are talking about and so on. So this is also the factor. And the fourth reason is the scalability. We can scale the translation system depending on the business needs of our clients. So this is very flexible solutions depending on the problem we have to solve. So once we decided to go into this direction, we had some 3 months of research about what kind of machine translation solution would be the best one for us. And we, in collaboration with our partners from Tilde, from Latvia, we decided to choose software as a service model. This is a model in which software is centrally hosted and is licensed over the basic on subscription basis, subscription, we are paying simply subscription fee and for the use of the service. And this solution, I think, is according to our knowledge and according to our experience, is the best solution for smart to medium LSPs, because we are not having high costs related to research and development. A machine translation system is a very, very costly solution. It takes a lot of time, a lot of infrastructure. We need a huge computing power to calculate all the probabilities in the machine translation system, the statistics. So it requires a lot of hardware and software and a lot of computing power. So without this and using software as a service model, we don't have this high upfront cost. We have no maintenance costs because no hardware. Hardware is centrally hosted in the, our service provider. We can scale the service depending on our business needs. We have also a very important feature, that is the integration with CAD tools, because main commercially available MT solutions offer plugins to the CAD tools, main CAD tools like Trados, MemoQ, MemSource, MateCAD, and so on. So you can plug the machine translation system into your production environment. And last but not least, we can have our custom machine translation engine trained with our own linguistic resources. And resources, especially language resources, is the main subject of this conference, and I also would like to dedicate some space for this, because in my opinion, from our perspective, very good resources are the key to the success of the machine translation system. Without good resources, we cannot do much. This is systems we are using, there are statistical systems that are based on the statistics. It means that the more high quality resources we have, the better the quality of the final output is. And because of these, we did a very careful selection of what we use to train the system, so to teach the system how to translate. First of all, we have our bilingual documents stored in our translation memories. So we are reusing old human translations after full translation, editing, proofreading cycle. So with the resources with the high quality approved by our clients to train the system. The second resources, you are using, of course, publicly available bilingual resources of good quality like DGT Corpora and recently published Parallel Corpus of United Nations. And third, the kind of resources we are using, which are very important for machine translation output for the target language, are so-called monolingual corpora, so the documents in the target language that help the system to translate documents correctly according to the target languages. And the fourth kind of resources is human review terminology that is adapted to the domain. Taken this all, we trained the systems, but we are not trying to be Google Translate. I think that being a translator and talking to translators, I noted that in many cases translators have some doubts about machine translation because they are recalling Google Translate like a system which does not work correctly. Of course, because it is a general system, not business-driven system, and all the resources they're mixed. So if you put poetry there, it doesn't work. If you put user interface, it works. So we didn't want to be a second Google Translate, so we categorize according to the domains. All the data are divided according to the domains: legal, technical, software, documentation, or clients. If client produces some kind of very standard repetitive content, we may use machine translation for this because it will work better than for non-standard content. So the more standardized text, the better for machine translation. Statistics. So the statistically, it is easier to translate standard content than non-standard one. And we are using such resources to train the MT engines we are using, and we are using this engine only to translate the content from a given domain. If, for example, we have the legal English-Polish or Polish-English engine, we are not translating finals because the results will be of very low quality, and it is quite easy to see that the quality is very low. There is a lot of untranslated words in the output. It means that the system, the training data used to train the system don't contain the words that should be translated, and the system simply left them untranslated. And this is the most annoying thing in the post-editing. So having done this, we wanted to prepare machine translation process, and this machine translation process we wanted to have a very main feature. It should be very easy to do for our project managers. It should be plugged into the translation pipeline, and it shouldn't be very difficult to do this. So we integrated this thanks to the Tilde machine translation plugin offered along with the service of machine translation into our CAD environment. And from the point of view of the PM, you can see here there is a settings. There is a checkbox use machine translation, and simply PM has to click OK, and then it works. After 50 minutes, depending on the volume, of course, the project is translated, and you don't have to do anything. Everything is done according to the standard CAD tool workflow. It is very important because it does not require much more technical knowledge, only basic training, and it works. I'm supervising these projects, and now I did the training for PMs. We have 12 PMs now, and now I don't have anything in common with. I don't have to monitor them, so they are simply doing it like other process. I simply monitoring cost, productivity, quality, and some other factors, but process is done entirely by them. And as I said, this process requires empty engines specialized in a given domain. This one-click process, and in our translation, as it was also pointed out in the previous presentation about European Commission machine translation, we are reusing previous translations from translation memories. Basically, I could present the same slide, the same screenshots from the CAD tools. We have matches coming from machine translation, which are different from matches coming from the translation memory. We are using machine translation above the threshold, below the threshold 75% simply only for new words. So we are reusing previous translations, and we are combining machine translation with it. And the key to success is also the people. In my opinion, I think good post-editors are very important, and post-editing is a different kind of service, not always very easy for translators, because normal translators who didn't have much in common with machine translation tend to translate from the scratch, and the task is to simply correct the translation done by the machine. And later on I will show you some examples of machine translation post-editing we are doing. In the process we have, of course, statistics. We are measuring cost and productivity gains. We have quality metrics. We are using edit distance. We are using distance is the distance of automatic correction of number of insertions and deletions that have to be done in order to obtain human quality level of machine translation output. And of course, very important is feedback from post-editors. So if they spot some errors, especially repetitive errors, typical errors for machine translation, they are asked to give the feedback so that we can create rules and develop the system. For example, our post-editors told us that there is no number conversion. It was quite easy to do the number conversion between different number formats from English into Polish. So we switch it on, and now system automatically converts all the numbers from English format into Polish format and other way around. Of course, not 100% correct, but 95% is enough in this case. And last but not least, the machine translation process is a virtuous cycle. We are constantly improving our systems by retraining them. Once we translate some for 100,000 words, monthly or 2 months for a given domain, we send the data to Tilde to retrain the system. And the system is retrained based on the human post-editing, and therefore we can expect that the quality of the final output will be better and better, and therefore the amount of work that should be done by our post editors will be lower and lower. So the system should produce better results over time, of course, if the kind of text we are translating will be the same. So to sum up, our successful MT process consists of 4 major elements. First of all, the high quality resources, including terminology, then optimized machine translation technology, then integration into CAD tool workflow, and last but not least, trained post editors. In the next 2 slides, I wanted to show you some examples of MT system in action. We have legal domain, Polish into English. We have also English into Polish, but since the examples will be much more easy to understand, I choose English ones. And you have source PL, then raw MT output, and then you have the output after post-editing of machine translation. I highlighted for you changes in red, but please note that many of these changes are related only to capitalization. So in the very first sentence, the consultant was changed from lower to uppercase, and this is the only change that post-editor had to make. As you can see, these are the legal texts, very long ones, and the system is doing quite well. We have been using machine translation already for 5 months. October is the fifth month we are using machine translation, and it was period of 2 months of testing. So 7 months we are using, and for 5 months we have been using the system into the production. So we're simply producing value for the company, and we're producing value for our clients. So it is complete, of course there is huge room for improvement, but the system is working well enough to produce the output that can be post-edited. Because basic requirement of the system of machine translation is produce output that somebody can do something with this output. If the translator says, okay, that's fine, but I should translate it from the scratch, it would be faster, it's a mistake, so we shouldn't use this system. So the output should be good enough to be post-edited. So in the second slide, you can see that we have a little bit shorter sentences, and in case of very short sentences, the system works quite well. Almost no correction is needed. So, and please note that this is the Polish. Polish is as a source language. We also have Polish as a target language. And we, of course, Polish is highly inflectional language with a very complicated syntax and morphology. But if we train the data correctly, we can obtain quite good results in a very narrow domain. Even the narrower the domain is, the better the results are. For example, now we are testing pharmacy from Polish into English. We started with Polish into English direction because it is easier to translate for us. We noted that it's easier to translate from inflectional language into English than other way around. Of course, the whole process wasn't so easy. We had to overcome 3 major challenges. First of all, the challenge was human-related. Convince our translators that the idea of machine translation simply makes sense and can be useful for them too, so that they will not lose their jobs, as they often pointed out in our discussion of ours, because it is not the point that they are losing their jobs, they will be translating more content, and as it was pointed out at the very beginning, the content is I think doubled each 2 years. Every 2 years the content is doubled of the internet, and there is a huge part of the content that is not translated, and without machine translation it would not be never translated. It wouldn't be translated. So machine translation means that we are translating more, and there will be plenty of jobs for translators, post-editors, and that's not the problem. The second was the quality. As I said, we wanted to have the good initial quality so that we can start using it in a business environment, produce value for translators, produce value for our clients. And this was the second challenge. And the third one was technical. As I mentioned, we wanted to integrate machine translation seamlessly into the CAD translation workflow so that it would be easy. So nobody has excuse that we are not using it because it's too complicated. It should be as easy as possible, because time is also a key factor, and number of projects we are doing, and so on. And to summarize, I wanted to share with you what we gained through this machine translation process. Of course, this is only very first summarization of what we are doing, because machine is translation at our company is quite a young solution, only 5 months, but we want to go this step. We are adding more engines, we are testing more language combinations, and first of all, we did reduce the cost of translations by 29%. We have higher productivity on average by 30%, so we can translate 30% more content than normally. Normal output of translator is 2,000, 2,500 words. We can translate to 3,500 words daily using machine translation, even 4,000. We have the ability to adapt to clients' needs by creating new engines. If there is huge projects with the possibility of use machine translation, we can have a machine translation engine in 1-2 weeks, trained and prepared for the first use. We can offer a new service, raw machine translation. Raw machine translation means that we translate only some text for the information purposes and without necessity of post-editing, because in some content, some clients don't need full human translation because they cannot afford paying, or it doesn't make simply sense to pay. So we can give them the notion about what the text is using raw machine translation and simply producing basic output. So this is a new service we can offer. We did improve quality of MMT output thanks to the engine retraining periodically and feedback from post-editors, and in cooperation with our partner from Latvia, we are working on adding new features like this automatic number conversions to the MT systems so that the work of post-editors is faster and is better. So the system, the machine translation we are using should be beneficial both for us, for our customers, clients, and for our translators, because we also aim at having good translators on board, so that and take care to give them the job they like and they can do in a good way, so they can to help them to do their jobs. So this machine translation from our perspective should be beneficial for both the company, for our vendors, and for our clients. Thank you. I'm more than happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Steven Krauer, and I'm here on behalf of another Commission-funded project, LT Observatory, where we try to acquire, identify and give access to parallel data to commercial parties for the development of their MT systems and services. And my question is actually not to you. Thanks for your interesting presentation. What I spotted in your presentation and the presentation that I listened to before that is a large amount of parallelism in terms of needs for resources between, let's say, private players like you and the people I'm working with and the Commission. And now I know that the Commission program is rather self-centered. It's all about the Commission needs and the public administration. But I was wondering whether your program contains or will contain any interesting hooks for collaboration between, let's say, the public parties and private parties, where we, or let's say the commercial parties, could benefit from your achievements and vice versa. Because I think it would be pity to just treat this as two different silos where everybody does his own job, not benefiting from each other.
Sorry to take. That was not intentional, but I think it links. Actually, it links very well with your. I would not. Don't go, because you might get other questions, and I can be one of these. Yes, it is based, the system as it is now, it is self-centric in the sense that it is used for internal purposes, but it also extends to public administrations, so outside the remit of the European institution. The machine translation is a part of what our visions for self-automated translation is. It means that there are other tools that perhaps we expect to include in machine translations. Let's call it natural language processing tool. It may include, let's say, tools to support transliteracy or other things. But so there is an ongoing work there. And yes, the idea would be this is what actually is from the scratch, The idea is to connect with other actors who can provide and build on the top of what this infrastructure is going to provide. One thing which must be clear is that we are anchored within the CEF regulation. I don't want to sound to be administrator, but at the end of the day, that's what we are. That is the perimeter on which we are working, which means that we are providing services for the DSIs at the moment and to public administration. So yes, it's welcome, and actually we are reflecting on making it even stronger. So that's.
Maybe if I can just briefly add to that, it's a very important question. I think one point is that the EC and the EU have a long tradition of sharing their data. And I think there's almost no public company in the area of machine translation that hasn't at one stage or other stage looked at GRC Acquis, at Europar. And actually, if you look at I think Wendy is here, it used to be the case that the most downloaded resource from the Open Data Portal is actually the Europar. And so I think this shows how much the EU is also sharing their resources. If you want to bootstrap a language, I think one of the first places to go, if it's a European language, you go to EC data. Second point is that any of the data that is collected by ELRC, that is publicly available data, will also be made available to everybody, including companies, SMEs, like the one that has just presented here so impressively. Within 5 months or 7 months, I think it's an amazing amount of work that you've and success that you've had here. So that's the intention. If it's publicly available, it will be publicly available. It's just a channel through which this goes. Some of the data may not be publicly available. That, of course, cannot be made and shared. But the whole idea is really sharing, and also sharing beyond the EC, beyond the national public services, and also make this available for companies.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. The only thing I could contradict in your presentation, and coming out of the military, I would say that user-generated is not a field that machine translation can apply. This is my experience. In the case, you said about standardized. Yes, this is a very limited part of it. If we are talking about user-generated, let's say, terminology, this remains and stays closed. And I'm not talking about confidentiality in the strict military sense of it, but I'm talking about confidentiality generally speaking. So that's just a remark, nothing more than that. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay. So I agree with you that user-generated content might pose many problems, especially in the case of Facebook. Facebook is using its own machine translation systems, and they had a lot of problems with adopting it because they wanted to translate messages full of slang, expressions, and so on. So in some cases, user-generated content may be a problem for machine translation, but it depends on the data we have. But I agree with you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jaroslaw. That was a very interesting presentation. I have two questions. One is whether in the integrations workflow you only look at machine translation tools, or you also expand to other tools that can support the work of the translators. So, because from the presentation, it was mainly focused on machine translation as a complement to the work of the translators. And then I'm interested about any other reflections or insight you can give to us about this challenge of perceiving machine translation, which I think it's common to the previous presentation, as a substitute for human labor. So the race is not very much the race against the clock, but it's the race against the machine in this case. So what is your experience on the let's say the feedback you got from the translators, whether they fear that progress here may endanger jobs, or thank you.
Okay, thank you for these questions. For the first question, yes, we are helping our translators because they are mainly working in CAT tool, and CAT tool already has a lot of productivity options, and machine translation is an additional productivity option that can be added. This is already a standard. Each CAT solution has its own machine translation plugins: MemoQ, MateCAT, MemSource, Trados, WordFast, Omega T, Deja Vu, Transit, and so on and so on. I tried many of them. I worked in many of them, and this is the standard now. Standard. So we are using MemoQ as a server-based solution, and it has a lot of productivity options because this tool was developed with translator at its center. So machine translation is an additional option and is integrated seamlessly. As far as the second question is concerned, yes, we did some efforts to convince our translators that they will lose their jobs because of the machine, and that they do not have to race against the machine, but to work and use machine for their purpose. I think the problem is the same like in the case of CAD tools in the very early period when the CAD tools were introduced. Many translators perceived it as a danger to the threat to the work, but in fact this is widely used and it helps. I was never translating without CAD tools as a translator, and I think translating a lot of software UI, different content coming from different sources, CAD tool is a quite important and difficult to replace solution. And the same is machine translation. Machine translation actually can help if it's done well with translator. It's its center, not only with taking into account the possibility of reduction of cost, but taking into account the way translator works to help him. So if we are trying to develop machine translation to help our translators to work better and faster, and we spend some time, we invited them to the office, we prepared the training, we have online trainings, we have on-site training to show them how it works, what the post-editing is, what it's required, how important and valuable is their feedback about the machine translation, and how it may be beneficial for them in a long run. So because we'll be translating more and they will have more and more jobs. In terms of weighted word count, they will translate the same, but only faster. So it practically does not change nothing, because instead of translating 2,000 words, they are translating 3,000 words, and the amount of money they get for it is quite the same, or even more, because we have more and more projects. Because our clients, noted that it works, so they can work. And once you can, because post-editing is a quite different service, so once you can learn how to do the post-editing, it is quite easy for you, because the basic, I think the basic notion is to have the ability to say after 2 or 3 seconds if the segment should be post-edited or not. So when you learn this, it goes faster and faster, and this machine translation system will be also improved over time. So, and with improving the skills of translators and the ability to work in post-editing, I think it's working for both benefits of both sides. That's. Of course, I think a lot of job has to be done as far as the consciousness of the machine translation of technology, but we are living in the period where we, in the multilingual period, I think we are developing a lot of machine translation and a lot of language technology solutions now. Last week, I think Systran made public their own platform of the neural machine translation system. There is no Polish, but I checked results from English, Italian. I used the article from The Economist, quite difficult, and the results were quite good. Good enough to be understood by a person who is not native speaker of Italian, but speaks Italian. So that's the second stage of machine translation solution. And then the second thing is that there are some tools that are called adaptive machine translation. There's another development in machine translation. In fact, it is not a simple machine translation that is given, but this machine translation that learns on the fly when the translator translates. So it's giving suggestions on the fly. So it's collaborating with the translation. It's the second stage, and we have also in the company working on such solutions for Polish. So that's about the question. I think so.
Just very briefly, because I always notice also when we have exchanges with experiences from other ministries in France or somewhere else, that there are lots of similarities, and for us also the uptake went up when there was a further step of automation, where before we needed to request the translation, machine translation manually and then integrate them into the project. As soon as it became automatically available, the uptake was higher. And also, I think even if we don't as explicitly have this as feedback, if we know that we have about 1 million of pages that have been requested by the Commission officials just as raw machine translation, this is 1 million pages that we don't need to translate. So, and that don't need to be translated because as if raw machine translation is enough, that actually helps us in our work, because if that's sufficient, we don't need to translate things that actually don't need to be translated with human translation. So.
Maybe just a quick comment, because we're eating into our coffee break time. What I found really interesting in your presentation is the business ecosystem that you sketched. There's a machine translation technology provider providing the servers, the technologies at the back end, and that's a service that is taken by you. And you put that into action. You fill that with life, with feeding it with the data for your clients and linking it with your translators, etc. So there's at least 3 business entities, going back to Steven's question, involved in this. It's the customers, it's the LSPs with all their intelligence and knowledge, and there's sort of like the back-end technology provider with the infrastructure, the big servers, training the MT engines, looking after the SMT systems, etc. And I think that's a really, really good example. And from what I understand, that's also an idea about the current planning in CEF, that, for example, the EC might be looking for outside providers, providing such infrastructure, providing engines, etc. So I think there's a wide playing field for sort of like public-private partnerships, for lack of a better word, really.
So, okay. So thank you for your attention.